Hello everyone, good morning and a very warm welcome to our webinar today all about the month-end process. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and I am joined today by my colleagues Alice and Laura, who are both standing by in the background, ready and waiting to answer your questions. So this session does follow on from our Get Your Payroll Done processing webinar, and this will cover off the tasks that you'd complete at the end of each tax month. Let's now take a look at what we'll cover in the webinar. So we're going to start with the P32 report and the Employer Payment Summary, or EPS submission. So this forms part of our month-end checklist of 3 tasks that you must complete at the end of each month. So we'll have a look at the information on the P32 report and we'll explain how and when to submit an EPS. We'll then take a look at reconciling reports. So this gives you a way of checking that your pre-update reports match the information that's actually been updated in payroll, and it helps you to see a breakdown of your P32 figures, which forms the liability that you need to pay over to HMRC. And I'll share a couple of hints and tips on what to do if the reports for some reason don't match up. And then we're going to finish the webinar today with a section on employment allowance. We'll run through the eligibility, how to claim it in your Sage 50 payroll software, how you get the employment allowance by reducing your employer's national insurance, and also looking into the future, into 2025, at some of the changes to employment allowance announced in the budget. And then I'll run you through the further support available, including other webinars, our Help Centre and Sage U, before we wrap up. So let's start things off by taking a look at the P32 and the EPS, which are the 2 key tasks in our month-end checklist. So once you've completed processing for the full tax month, you should run your P32 report to show you how much you need to pay to HMRC in terms of tax and national insurance that you've deducted from employees, as well as items you may have reclaimed, such as statutory payments. You would then, if applicable, submit an employer payment summary, an EPS, and this reports values that aren't included on your regular FPS submissions. And the third task is to make your payment to HMRC. So the payment deadline for tax and national insurance is the 19th of the month, or the 22nd of the month if you pay electronically. So do make sure you've made your payment by the deadline. You can see the amount that's due to be paid on that P32 report. And you can read this full checklist following the link there on the slide. Now, something it's important to understand is that when we're talking about month end in the world of payroll, we are of course talking about the tax calendar. So the tax year begins on the 6th of April, and therefore every tax month starts on the 6th day of the calendar month and ends on the 5th day of the following month. So you must complete processing for all pay dates within the tax month before you go ahead and run any of these month-end tasks. So for today's demo, we'll be working in tax month 8. So that's the tax month that started on the 6th of November and will end on the 5th of December. So it's important to check that we've completed all of our pay runs for pay dates that fall within that period. If you pay monthly, it's pretty straightforward. Once you've done your monthly payroll, you're then good to move on to month end. But if you pay weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly, do check your upcoming pay dates and do make sure that you've completed payroll for all pay dates up to and including the 5th of the next calendar month. So in my example, I have monthly and weekly. My weekly paid employees are paid on a Friday. So in tax month 8, I need to ensure that I have completed these 4 periods here. So the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. So we're going to show you the report in the demo, but I do want to first explain what information we'll find on a P32. So this is a typical example of a P32 report. It has 21 items, which make up your PAYE liability for the month. Towards the top of the report, items 1 to 4, you'll find the total of the PAYE income tax you've deducted from employees, any student or postgraduate loan deductions, and the gross national insurance. So that's the employee and the employer contribution combined. And all of that information is submitted to HMRC as part of your full payment submission, or FPS, when you complete your pay run. Now, if those are the only items on your P32, that will form the total amount due. And there's no need to worry about doing an EPS to report any adjustments. However, on the P32 reports, there are items that would adjust the amount payable, mainly reductions in your liability. So that would include any employment allowance you're currently claiming. We're going to talk about employment allowance later on in the webinar, and any statutory payments that you've recovered within that period. Now, you can only recover parental payments. It is not possible to reclaim statutory sick pay from HMRC, but maternity, paternity, adoption, etc. can be recovered. And depending on whether you qualify for small employers relief, you'd either get 92% of the payment back, or you would get 100% of the statutory pay and 3% NI compensation. And I will show you the small employers relief setting in the demo. Further down the report, item 18 are apprenticeship levy payments. So the apprenticeship levy is a tax that some employers need to pay if they have an annual pay bill of more than £3 million. So it's calculated at a rate of 0.5% of the total pay bill. So that's the total earnings subject to national insurance, but it's only payable on earnings in the year above £3 million. So the way that it works is you're given an allowance of £15,000, which you don't have to pay apprenticeship levy on, and then anything above that will be calculated on your P32. So once you've made those deductions where applicable and added on any apprenticeship levy you're liable to pay, you then get the total amount that you need to pay to HMRC. So total amount due is there in box 21, and that is what you would need to pay over. So let's take a look now at running the P32 report. I'm just going to bring the slides down. And I'm currently logged into my payroll. Now, for this demo, I do have weekly paid and monthly paid employees. So I want to check that I've completed all pay dates in the tax month. So starting with my monthlies, if I check the last updated and last FPS date column, that is displaying my November pay date, which confirms that I've updated records and I've submitted my FPS for that period. And then if I check my weekly paid employees, last updated and last FPS date are showing the 29th of November. Now, my next weekly pay date is the 6th of December, which falls into the next tax month. So this confirms that I have completed my payroll for all periods in tax month 8, which is the month that I'm kind of closing. So what I can now do is run my P32 reports. If you're on your payroll tasks, top tip here is you've got a quick link to the P32 report in this links section on the left-hand side. But it can also be found if you go into the main reports option above the employee list and then check the period end folder. So it's this report here, Form P32 Employer Payment Record. And if I just double click the report to generate a preview, the criteria values will ask me what tax month I'm running the report for. So in this case, it is month 8, the November tax month. So we've got 8 and 8 in the criteria. And then if I click OK, we then get the report preview on screen. I'm just going to scroll in, and then we can see the date from and to for the tax month, and we can start to see the totals that make up our liability. So this month we have tax and national insurance to pay across, and those figures were reported in our FPS. We've already claimed all of the employment allowance for this year, so there's nothing further to claim this month. But I do have some statutory payments recovered, as I have processed some statutory maternity pay. So I'm recovering that and the NIC compensation as a small employer. Now, looking further down the reports, you can see that these are NIC deductions. So effectively, it reduces our NI liability, and it gives us a net national insurance figure. And then at the very bottom of the screen, we've got the total amount due. So this is £2,752.77 after deducting the SMP that we're eligible to reclaim. Now, the tax, national insurance and student loans has already been submitted in my FPS, but the statutory payments I've recovered will need to be submitted as part of an EPS, an employer payment summary, at the end of this tax month. Now, with this report, I could print a copy for my own records, or I could export it and save it as a PDF, so I can then look back on that easily. And once you've got the report you need, you can then close out of this preview. I'm going to close out of the reports, and that is the P32 ran. Now, whenever you run a P32, it will record certain details in your company settings. So if I click on my company tasks and then click settings, first thing just to point out is that the small employers relief setting for recovering statutory payments has been selected for my company. So this means that I've checked and I'm eligible to claim 100% of statutory pay and 3% NI compensation. And the eligibility for small employers relief is having a total national insurance bill of £45,000 or less in the tax year before the qualifying week. So it's one of the checks that we recommend that you do at the start of each tax year to see if you're eligible. And in this example, I do have that box ticked, which is why you saw the small employers relief on the P32. But anyway, I'm going to click HMRC payments, and this is where it's recorded the details from my P32. So this month, tax month 8, got £2,752.77 to pay. And you can see, if you look earlier in the year, I have been claiming employment allowance, but I've already claimed the full amount, so there is nothing further being claimed at this point in the year. But we're going to talk more about employment allowance later on. So that is the P32 report. So just to recap there, you've got your tax, student loans and national insurance contributions. You then deduct any employment allowance you're claiming for this period, statutory payments recovered, add on any apprenticeship levy, and that is your total amount to pay. And because we've recovered a statutory payment, and the same would be true if we had paid apprenticeship levy, this month we do need to submit an EPS or employer payment summary. So that's what we're going to take a look at next. So an EPS is required if any of the following apply. So you're recovering statutory payments, you've suffered CIS deductions, you're reporting apprenticeship levy, or you're informing HMRC that no payment is due. So that last reason is where you haven't paid any employees during the month, so you haven't sent any FPS submissions. So at the end of the month, you send an EPS and you choose the reason that no payment is due. The reason I'm going to send one, though, is because I've recovered a statutory payment. So we need to let HMRC know how much we've recovered. And an EPS will always submit the year-to-date value for the items that you're recovering. So if I'd recovered any other statutory payments during this tax year, it will include those amounts in the submission totals. And HMRC basically look at the difference between the most up-to-date submission and the previous submission to see how much to reduce the current month's bill by. So let's take a look at this one in the program. So I'm going to return to my payroll tasks. And if you check the links, you'll see that there is a link for employer payment summary. So you could do this from your payroll tasks. Alternatively, you can go to e-submissions, and then you'll find employer payment summary in the list of tasks here. So I need to send it to reclaim my statutory pay. It is just sent once a month. So even though I have a weekly payroll, we would only do this as part of our month-end tasks. Now, if I click onto employer payment summary, it first asks for the reason for the submission. So in my example, it's because I'm adjusting my payment So I've recovered statutory pay. It'll ask you to confirm the tax month the submission relates to. So for me, it's tax month 8. And then it will display the statutory pay that you've recovered for the tax year. Now, this month was the first month that I reclaimed a statutory payment. So it is showing me my SMP recovered and the NIC compensation. But next month when I do this, as I'll be recovering SMP then, it will show the cumulative total. So I can click onto next, as I'm happy with those figures. If you do need to claim CIS deduction suffered, this is all manual entry on the EPS. So you would type the year-to-date value of your CIS deduction suffered in that box, if applicable. And if there's no payment due, because the amounts you've recovered are more than the tax and the national insurance that you're paying over, you can tick this box as well to indicate that you won't be making a payment because this month you're kind of in credit. So it doesn't apply to me. I've just got a reduced amount to pay, so I'm just going to click next. It's then going to display the apprenticeship levy values that have been calculated. So this is the annual allowance. So I don't have any apprenticeship levy to pay because I'm below that allowance. And then when we complete this wizard by clicking next and finish, that will then take us into the submission. So you can ignore the warning. This is just because I'm in the training room, but you'll get this screen, employer payment summary. You'd click on to continue, where it shows your login details and company details. And then when you click submit, it'll confirm the tax year. You can print this summary if you wish, using the print option here, but I'm just going to go ahead and submit it. So you'll see the progress bar move across, and when the submission's complete, you should see this confirmation message. So that has now been sent. If you ever do need to look back on an EPS you've previously sent, from the eSubmissions tasks, go into your eSubmissions log. Then if I scroll all the way to the bottom, that's my latest submission, the EPS. So I can select it and check the details. And if you click more details, you can actually see the values that were included in the submission. So that is my EPS and P32 complete. Just a note on the deadline for this one, EPS must be submitted by the 19th of the month that the tax period ends. So if you're talking calendar month, the 19th day of the following calendar month is the deadline for this submission. So the only other task on that checklist was to make your payment to HMRC. That would be done outside of payroll. So with your usual payment method, you need to ensure that you pay the amount due by the payment deadline of the 19th if you pay by check, or the 22nd of the month if you pay electronically. Now, what I want to show you next is a way that you can check some of the values that you've seen by reconciling reports. Now, this is an optional task, and they said with the introduction of RTI that reconciliation would be pretty much eliminated, and that's true when it comes to the end of the tax year. You're not reconciling your full annual payroll to do an annual return, but it is still a good idea to check that the values each month that you've processed are correct, and you can do that by doing a bit of report reconciliation. So main reasons you would do this are to check that your pre-update reports match the information you've updated in payroll. So payslips, payment summary reports, for example, is usually what you base your payment on when you pay your staff. So we're just checking that the information updated in payroll, in your payroll history, is the same. And it can also give you a handy breakdown of the totals that you're seeing on the P32. So if you want to see how that total PAYE is made up, you can check other reports that will break that down for you. Now, the reports I'm going to focus on today are the payment summary reports, parts 1 and 2. So you would run those as a pre-update report at the point you're processing your payroll. We're going to run the payment summary history report, parts 1 and 2, at the end of the month. And that's going to show us in the same format as the payment summary what has been updated in payroll. So those reports should match. And then we'll also look at how you can break down the figures on your Form P32, the employer payment record. And there are other suggested reports and guidance available from our help centre if you follow the link there on the slide. So let's just now return to the demo. I've completed all my pay runs for tax month 8. So what I'd like to do is to check that everything still matches up with my pre-update reports and also see what has made up my liability to HMRC. So the reports I'm going to run are the payment summary history reports. And when you do this, it's really important that you include all employees that were paid at the time. So before you run the report, just check your criteria settings, just here above the employee list. Make sure in the exclusions at the bottom, you've unticked on hold, current year leavers and on holiday, so that we're showing leavers in our list. Do make sure that you've selected the all employees folder in the outline section. So you can get that by clicking outline. We've got all employees in view. And if I click clear and then swap, I can go into the reports option. I've added these to my favorites. So it's the payment summary history, part 1 and part 2. I'm going to run them by date. So we've then got a direct comparison with the original payment summary reports we ran. And if you're looking for these, they're found in the company folder. So if you scroll down, sorry, the employee folder, beg your pardon. If I scroll down, I've got payment summary history, part 1 by date and part 2 by date. So these are the two that I would recommend. So I'm going to preview them again on screen. It's going to ask you for report criteria. And because we're going to compare this with our P32, ultimately, I'm going to enter the processing dates for the tax month. So that is the 6th of November through to the 5th of December, 2024. So that's what I've entered in the processing date criteria. And then you can see here from the preview, we have a report which is grouped by the process date. So I've got a report for tax week 31, 32, 33, and 34. I also have my monthly report here for tax week 35. Now, if you wanted to just double check that everything on this report matches up with what you paid your employees, the idea is you would compare these figures with the original payment summary reports. And if you do find any differences, what you would then need to do is a little bit of investigation to identify which pay date or employees are affected. And then you'd need to establish what was actually paid to the employee and what should have been paid. Now, if the history report reflects everything that should have been paid to the employee, you won't need to make any corrections in payroll. But if you have paid them based on your original pre-update report that was different, you may need to make an adjustment for that employee. Or if the correct information was on the original report, but it's different in the updated report, that's when you might need to do a correction. So this was part 1. You can export this and save it as a PDF, or you could print it out, and you might want part 2 to go with it. So run it in the same way with the same criteria. 6th of November to 5th of December. And again, as it's grouped by date, we've got a section for each pay date in that tax period. Now, I've actually saved these reports onto my desktop, so I'll quickly show you how you might go about reconciling them. So I've got my payment summary history, part 1, which I'll just bring up on screen. So I ran that from the 6th of November to the 5th of December. And I'm just going to check a couple of the periods here. So I'm going to check my monthly payroll. So that was on the 30th of November. And to do a quick check, I would just have a look at the total net pay for this report, and I would compare it with the original payment summary part 1. So I've got 12,320.73 as my total net pay, and I've got exactly the same on my original payment summary. And that's a really good indicator that these reports match up. Now, if you did find a difference in the total, you would then need to look at the individual employees, establish if anyone's missing, if any payments have changed, do a bit of investigation to work out what is the sort of truth and whether or not you need to make corrections in payroll. And similarly, if I was checking my weekly report for week 34, got total net pay figure here, 824.16, and I can tick that one off. So this one matches up as well. So hopefully you get the idea there of how to compare your pre-update reports, these ones here, with the payment summary history. But the other good thing about this report is it got report totals for the full tax month. So if I look at PAYE, for example, when I look at the report total on the last page of this report, that gives me my total PAYE for the month, 2527.60. And if I then look at my P32, you can see that that figure will always match. Now, if you are seeing differences between payment summary history and the P32, double check your criteria to make sure you're not excluding any levers or anything like that. And also make sure you've run it for the correct dates. So it's the tax period dates, 6th to the 5th. And then you could check your totals, add together the national insurance, etc. So that's just a little bit on reconciling the reports. One other report I'll just quickly mention in payroll. So if you go to the main reports option at the top and go to period end, there is the Form P32, payment summary reconciliation. So that does give you kind of a true breakdown of most of the figures on your P32. So if I ran that for month 8, for example, you can see it has got a section for each pay date, but it does use the same column headings. So gross national insurance, for example, and the recovery amounts for any statutory payments obviously are picked up as the appropriate percentages. So that's another report that you might find useful, payment summary reconciliation. So that's reconciling reports. As I say, it is optional, but it's a good thing to do at the end of the month just to make sure that everything in your payroll records are correct. And we're now going to move on, and we're going to finish the webinar with some information all about employment allowance. So many of you will be familiar with this, but the employment allowance is a government initiative which enables eligible employers to reduce their employer national insurance contributions, currently by up to £5,000 each tax year. So if you're eligible for the employment allowance, you would usually claim it at the start of a tax year, and that will then allows you to reduce your payment to HMRC until you've used that full allowance up. Now, to be eligible, you need to be a business or charity with employers' Class 1 national insurance liabilities of less than £100,000 in the previous tax year. And that rule applies to all tax years from 22 to 23 to the current tax year, 24 to 25. But we'll talk about some changes to that a little bit later on. So you must apply for the allowance every tax year that you're eligible. It's usually a start of the tax year task, but you can claim at any point in the year that you're eligible and start reducing your employer's NI from that point. Now, there are some exclusions that apply to employment allowance. So you can't claim it if you're a public body or a business doing more than half of your work in the public sector. You can't get it if you're a company with one director who is the only employee liable for employer NICs. And companies that have state aid above the de minimis state aid threshold, where state aid rules apply, are also not eligible. But that is mainly businesses based in Northern Ireland, and you can read more about state aid rules on the guidance on the gov.uk website. Groups of charities or companies, known as connected companies. For the groups, only one company within the group can claim the allowance, and the total employer's NI for the group must be less than £100,000 to qualify. And if you're a company that has more than one payroll, more than one PAYE reference, again, only one of those payrolls can claim the allowance, and that total employer's NI does apply across the combined payrolls. and that is up to this tax year, as there is going to be a change to that rule next year. So once you've applied, and I'll show you how to do this in the demo, you'll be able to reclaim employment allowance on your P32 report. So it will calculate the amount of employment allowance that you can claim from the start of the tax year, and it will do that by reducing the employer NI to pay. So this particular P32 was for month 1. We claimed all of our employer NI that month, and then we still have some of our £5,000 allowance left over for the following months. And you can keep claiming until the allowance has been used up, and you can keep track of employment allowance in the HMRC payment section of your company settings. So let's take a look at setting this up. If I just bring the slides down again, I'm just going to switch to a different company which doesn't have employment allowance set up, just so I can show you the process. Just logging into that now. So if you've checked that you're eligible, to submit your claim, you'll need to head to the company tasks and go into your settings. And then on the details tab, you'll see this option to apply for EA. So all you do is you click on that, and it'll ask you if the state aid rules apply to your business. So usually applies to businesses located in Northern Ireland who sell goods or wholesale electricity, but read the guidance on gov.uk if you're not sure. For me, state aid rules are not applicable, so that's why I'm going to choose from the drop down. If they were applicable, you would state your state aid sector, and then you can submit your claim by sending an EPS. And once this is sent, that's you set up for the rest of the tax year. So you don't have to send this one every month. It's usually done at the start of the tax year or at the point you decide to claim. And when you send this through, it'll tell you that you're claiming employment allowance just here. You would submit that to HMRC. That's then received by them. And then you can tick this box confirming that you're eligible. Now, in the olden days, HMRC used to send a confirmation letter. They don't do that anymore, but if your claim is rejected, you will get an automated notification in your secure mailbox within 5 working days. And just some reminders that if you're part of a group, just one company or charity in the group can claim. But that is now set up for this company. I would then just click OK. And let's just assume this was claimed at the start of the year. If I go back and run my P32, which I'm going to do from my payroll links this time, just going to run it for month 1. You'll see that that's where my employment allowance is being claimed. The employer NI to pay is nothing, but it has reduced the total amount due compared to the tax and the NI that I was going to pay over. And as before, in your company settings, HMRC payments, you can actually see it's showing the employment allowance that I can claim kind of throughout the tax year. Now, one thing just to mention, if you are claiming mid-year, you are only allowed to claim the employer's NI that you've paid since the point you submitted your claim. So you may need to do it manually if you're claiming mid-tax year, and then get the P32 report to calculate it automatically as you move into the new year. But that's how it works. You keep claiming until it has run out. So that's a little bit on claiming employment allowance, but I do want to talk to you about some of the upcoming changes that were announced in the autumn budget. So with effect from April 2025, the employment allowance will increase from its current level of £5,000 per year to £10,500. So that has more than doubled. And the employer's NI maximum limit of £100,000 per year to be eligible will be removed. So this means there'll be a lot more businesses that are eligible for employment allowance moving into the new year. Now, as you'll be aware, they also announced that employers' NI contributions will increase from 13.8% to 15% in the new tax year, and the secondary threshold at which employers pay national insurance is being reduced from £9,100 to £5,000 per year. So this could be vital support, particularly for the smaller businesses who are already coping with increases in things like national minimum wage and the employer's ally contribution. If you're eligible for this, definitely get it claimed. Now, top tip for you, if you realise that you've been eligible for employment allowance and you've not been claiming it, it is possible to claim it retrospectively for up to 4 years from the end of the tax year that you were eligible. So if you are looking to claim it for years that you haven't already claimed it, you can submit your claim from Sage Payroll. It's really simple. You would just change your process date back into the earlier tax year, and then you would do the apply for employment allowance step. So I'll just quickly show you that in case it's helpful to anyone here. If I just bring the slides down again. So we've already set it up for the current tax year, and we can start to claim employment allowance from this point onwards for this year. But I realise as well that we were eligible in previous years. So to submit the claim for previous years, you would change your process date to the 5th of April of the previous year. So in this example, it's for tax year 2023 to 24. And you can then go to Company and Settings. You'll be able to apply for EA for that previous year. So again, state aid rules are not applicable in this example. I can then go ahead and submit this. Tick the box that I'm eligible and click OK. And by sending that EPS, HMRC will know that you're claiming for that previous year, and they can then either offset the amount that you should have claimed in that year against other PAYE liabilities that you might have, or probably more likely, they will pay you a refund of that employment allowance. So definitely worth checking that out. And if you need more guidance on claiming it retrospectively, you can always speak to HMRC's employer helpline. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the presentation today. I'd like to quickly go through some of the further support that's available to you, and we will try to stick around a few more minutes to try and answer as many of your questions. I'd like to start with some upcoming webinars. So if you are responsible for HR at your company as well as payroll, we have an HR advice webinar on the 3rd of December on the do's and don'ts for a successful Christmas party season. So featuring real life examples, it's one not to be missed. In terms of Sage 50 payroll, we have our festive payroll series, part 1 and 2, running in December. And we also have another Sage HR showcase around the leave management module. First session for that is the 11th of December. So you can find the details from our website, sage.co.uk/webinars. So do get yourself signed up if you'd like to join us. As always, if you need further help with your software, you can go to sage.co.uk/help to access our help centre, or click on any of the help icons in your programme. And we have a full range of e-learning courses, bite-sized learning and online certification available at SageU. So you can create a profile at sageu.com. So for the remaining 5 minutes of the session today, we are just going to focus on the questions in the Q&A. We'll continue to answer those in the chat. If you'd like a copy of our handouts, please remember to download them before you leave by clicking that piece of paper icon. We will do our very best to answer as many questions as possible, but if we've had a lot of them, we may not get round to yours, so apologies in advance. Look out for a follow-up email that we'll be sending you later today, because that will contain a recording of today's session. And as you leave the webinar today, I'd really appreciate a moment of your time to complete our webinar survey. Let us know what you thought of the webinar, what you liked, anything you might improve. We do read all of your comments. It really does help us to keep these webinars relevant, up to date, and continuously improving. So with that said, I'm going to go on to mute and help out with those questions, and I will come back to say goodbye when we're ready to wrap up. So I'll speak to you shortly. Hi again, everyone. That's just me back. We are just tackling the last few questions that have popped in there. It's been a busy session, so big thanks to Alice and Laura behind the scenes. If we haven't got around to answering your specific question, I do apologise, but you will find your answer perhaps on our help centre, or you can always contact our support team should you need to. So as we're about to wrap things up, if I could remind you just to take a moment to complete the survey as you exit the webinar today. It really does help us develop in these sessions moving forward, and look out for your follow-up email arriving in your inbox later this afternoon. So on behalf of myself and the team here at Sage, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you on some of our other webinars in the future. It's goodbye for now.